So, namaste, good evening, good morning, friends, and welcome you all to today's Bhagavad Gita study. The topic for our discussion today will be the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So, before we proceed ahead, we will quickly go through the summary of our previous session. So, in our previous meeting, we discussed and tried to understand the following topics: that there is no creation, actually, nothing was created, and what is the nature of Maya? We touched upon this, and everything is Maya except the one absolute, that the unthinkable, the unspeakable. And then different approach of visualizations were applied to understand the divine form, the formless approach, and with form also. And then we also tried to understand how to practice the yoga of divine form. There were different techniques which we tried to understand, and then the final practical aspect was how to consciously attune ourselves with the one self. And then we touched upon the meditation at the time of death. As we now going ahead, we will focus on chapter 13. And in one of our previous presentations, not related to this series, but regarding Bhagavad Gita, if you have seen that, as we had discussed earlier in that another presentation on the unique aspects of Bhagavad Gita, we know that there are different approaches in studying Bhagavad Gita. One common approach, which is applied and followed, um, and which is also sort of very famous, is dividing the 18 chapters into uh, three groups of 6 chapters. So this approach of grouping the chapters is mapped to one of the great sayings, which is also in Sanskrit known as Maha Vakyas. So Maha means great and Vakya means the statement. So, or a sentence or a phrase. So the one which is used with reference to Bhagavad Gita is known as Tattvamasi, thou art that. So there is this age-old occult aphorism which states that man know thyself, and it goes back to that. So the whole of Bhagavad Gita is about that. And as you can see, the first group consists of chapters 1 to 6, which focus on the uh, thou aspect or tvam. The second group from chapter 7 to 12 focus on that tat aspect. In the last group from chapters 13 to 18 focuses on the correlative verb art or asi. Asi in Sanskrit, you can think of it as equates to. So from this perspective, if we see, we can discern that the core message of Gita is that the real nature of each one of us is that we are that. However, we are sleeping the sleep of ignorance. We are deluded. And in this deluded state, we keep on creating disharmony. Karma is continuously being generated based on our thought, speech, and action. Vasanas, skandhas are created. Attachment is generated. And we keep on suffering in the cycle of birth and death. So, in one of our previous discussions, we also focused on the idea that we are actually not this particular body. And we also try to understand that we are none of these sheets, we are just Atman. And Atman is also one of the aspects or rays of Paramatma. And from that perspective, we are actually pure consciousness. That is our real nature. And there is no one Atman. We can't say my Atma or your Atma. We think my soul, your soul, but there is nothing like that, and there is only one Atma. So, in this context, we will do a deep dive because just to understand this idea that we are none of these bodies, we are just Atman, and that Atman is also a ray of Paramatma. Maybe logically will make sense, but how does one realize it? How does one have a first-hand experience? How do we truly understand this idea? Is the whole idea about this chapter, and we'll see that we have been provided the ultimate truth by the wise ones, the great masters, the great sages, the great rishis, that uh, what we have been mentioned in all these great scriptures is that unthinkable, unspeakable, speakable, that absolute reality is Brahman, and Brahman is Parabrahman. So we are not saying Brahma, the third logos, we are saying Brahman. So Brahman is actually Parabrahman, and the ray of Parabrahman is Atman. So from that perspective, we all are in reality Brahma itself, because the third logos is coming from the unmanifested logos. Unmanifested logos, if you see Parabrahman from that perspective, we are coming from that source, and that we also see in Secret Doctrine, where a ray of pre-cosmic ideation becomes cosmic ideation. Cosmic ideation, when reflected in any of the upadhis or koshas or vehicles, generates the consciousness, and so on and so forth. So that is our reality. Now, if you tell a small child who has not seen a flame, for example, um, and you tell him that he needs to be very careful, the flame can burn him. It will be very painful, and he should stay away from the flame. In normal majority of the cases, the child will accept whatever is mentioned to him as complete truth and have complete trust. He will not go take his finger and put in the flame and verify whether the parent is saying the truth or not. That's okay. But similarly, when we are told by our parents, the wise ones, the great sages, about our reality, then instead of believing, we have thousands of questions. We need hundreds of books. We need to understand, we discuss, we analyze, and keep on analyzing. And that's also fine, because we may say that we are not going to have blind faith. But then we get stuck in this analyzing and trying to understand the nitty-gritties and the depths of the idea. So it becomes a kind of a trap again. Now, Bhagavad Gita, especially this chapter, provides the right thinking, right roadmap, which helps us come out of this trap. And similarly, with respect to the great sayings which we have seen, uh, there are three other also, and which are consciousness is Brahma, and this self is Brahman, I am Brahma, and thou art that which we have seen. All of these actually point out the same thing. It's different ways of saying, different facets of the same diamond, and different approaches which are being applied. So the core message of all the teachings, including Bhagavad Gita, is this itself. And this 13th chapter actually directly focuses on this. And that is why it is important. Now, even though we divide the chapters in this manner, we need to realize that all the chapters in Bhagavad Gita are actually interrelated. So, even though it's divided in these groups, they are interrelated. Now, this 13th chapter is part of the third hexad, so the Asi part, the third part. This chapter actually captures the entire expanse of Bhagavad Gita. Hence, And hence we say that it's very profound, it's very dense. On the surface, it looks very simple. We may say it's the yoga of Kshetra and Kshetrajana. So, or Kshetrajna. It is the field and the knower of field. And it looks very simple, but actually it's not that simple. And there are a lot of deeper occult meanings in this. In today's discussion, we will set the context, and then from there onwards, we will look into the deeper aspects of the same. But before we proceed, there is this very interesting case of the missing shloka. So, there is this shloka, the first one, either you can label it as 1 or 0, which is the question from Arjuna to Krishna, based on which Krishna replies um, uh, to Arjuna and provides the entire in-depth knowledge in this chapter. So some of the Bhagavad Gita books have this, some do not have it. And in the WQJ rendition, this particular shloka is not given. But it's good to know that there exists this shloka wherein Arjuna asks, and he says, I wish to understand what is Prakriti and Purusha, and what is Kshetra, and what is Kshetrajna. I also wish to know what is true knowledge, what is the goal and purpose of this. So, um, from this perspective, if we see the entire chapter, actually, Krishna is talking and providing guidance. And this, as we have already discussed, becomes very important chapter, so important that in ancient times, the rishis and sages have sung about this in various shlokas, books, and Vedic hymns. In fact, in this chapter itself, it is mentioned, shloka number 4, that great sages have sung the truth about the field and the knower of the field in manifold ways. It has been stated in various Vedic hymns and especially revealed in the Brahma Sutras with sound logic and conclusive evidence. So, there has to be something very important in this chapter, and that's why it's been widely sort of advertised in all the various scriptures. So, um, then if you read the notes of WQJ, he says, it has been said of this chapter that it contains the whole of occultism, by which is meant that all inclusive occultism which begins with the highest point of perception and realization, the self within, and which regards action and reaction on every plane of manifestation as the process by which individual and universal power and wisdom are attained. So, talks about the self within, which regards action and reaction on every plane of manifestation. So, it's not just the physical one we are talking. We are talking about all the planes. And in this chapter, we also learn the yoga of the field and its knower, that herein we have a detailed exposition on how to meditate directly upon the imperishable, formless Atman, the higher self. Uh, sorry. With the 13 discourse, actually, when it commences, that is the third part of Bhagavad Gita. In the second part, Lord Krishna explains his doctrine with regard to the path of liberation by pointing out the source and the end of evolution. That is the manifested cosmos. And then he talks about his own place in nature, his various vibhutis, which is his various forms and manifestations. Then we have seen that what are the marks or the qualifications of a liberated man. Sthita Pragna, the one who raises himself above the gunas and the steps leading towards the goal. And then we also touched upon in the previous chapters that there is a clear understanding and difference between the self and the non-self. In 12th chapter, just before this, Lord Krishna taught Arjuna the meditation on the manifested Saguna Brahma, that is, with form and attributes, and the qualities which a devotee should have, but did not actually fully touch upon the nature of the unmanifested Nirguna Brahma, that is, the attributeless, formless Brahman. So, this chapter has its direct theme actually connected in the ideas also discussed in chapter 7, wherein Brahma as an object of knowledge and meditation is also known as the yoga of spiritual discernment, which is Jnana Vijnana Yoga. So, we also see that in the 7th chapter, Shloka 2, which says, I shall now reveal unto you fully this knowledge and wisdom, knowing which nothing else remains to be known in this world. So we find that Lord Krishna, while enunciating his doctrine, refers to jnana as knowledge which being known, nothing more remains to be known. So in this world, there is lots and lots of knowledge to be understood, achieved, read, contemplated upon, so on and so forth. But what if you get that knowledge after knowing which, or realizing which, or understanding which, there is nothing else which remains to be known? So why not directly go for that? And then in Shloka 9.1, that is chapter 9, Shloka 1, it's mentioned that Lord Krishna says, O Arjuna, unto thee who findeth no fault, I will now make known this most mysterious knowledge, coupled with the realization of it, which having known, thou shalt be delivered from evil. So, delivered from evil in the sense, thou shalt be liberated from the bondage of samsara or from delusion or ignorance. And then we see in chapter 4, Shloka 35, or rather, I would say 13 and 2, that Lord Krishna says it is that knowledge which through the soul is a realization of both the known and the knower. So 2 and 3 combined, they have the message that this perishable body, O son of Kunti, is known as Kshetra. Those who are acquainted with the true knowledge of things call the soul who knows it, Kshetrajna, know also that I am the knower in every mortal body. And then that knowledge which through the soul is a realization of both the known and the knower is alone esteemed by me as wisdom. So that knowledge is actually explained in depth and greater length in this particular discourse, in this particular chapter. And Lord Krishna provides more details on the same subject by first narrating what the kshetra is and what the attributes are and what the qualities it generates, what is its source, the reason of existence, and then finally what kshetrajna is and what the powers are there, and finally what the reality is. And then Lord Krishna also provides more in-depth information about the position of this true knowledge. So we see 13:23, those who understand the truth about the supreme soul, the individual soul, material nature, and the interaction of the three modes of nature together with the qualities will not take birth here again. So this is a direct statement. They will be liberated regardless of their conditions. Now, here Lord Krishna points out that the possession of this true knowledge, and there is an if, there is a big if properly acquired, That is when the proper means of attaining that knowledge is adopted, it leads to emancipation from the wheel of samsara. Further, we see that in 435, uh, Lord Krishna also says, by knowing this knowledge, thou shalt not again come under this kind of delusion. You will see all things and creatures whatsoever in thyself and then in me. So, this means that we are under a delusion wherein the true fact is that everything is that one reality itself. But because of some reason, we are 100% sure, convinced, and we know for a fact that we are this body, we are this personality, I am the I which I know, and the rest whole world is separate, and so on and so forth. So that delusion breaks once you realize this truth. And then finally, we see Lord Krishna actually wrapping up this particular discourse, the chapter, with the final shloka saying that they who by the eye of wisdom perceive the distinction between kshetra and kshetrajna and the liberation of all beings from prakriti, the differentiation of prakriti which is caused by avidya or ignorant delusion, they reach the supreme goal, or they reach the supreme. Now, we may ask, this is the final conclusion, the final shloka of this chapter. We may ask this question: what is this? What is this supreme goal? And in this context, there is a clear answer provided in chapter 8, shlokas 3 and 21. So we see Lord Krishna states that Brahma is the Aksharam, the imperishable, and the supreme. And it is that imperishable goal which the knowers of the Vedas declare, which the self controlled and the passion free only can enter. So it is called the unmanifested, the imperishable. That is the highest goal, which having reached, there is no return. And this is the supreme abode. So Brahma, the supreme, is imperishable, exhaustless. Adhyatma is the name of my being, manifesting as the individual self. Karma is the emanation which causes the existence and reproduction of creatures. And then 21 says, but there is that which upon the dissolution of all things else is not destroyed. It is indivisible, indestructible, and of another nature from the visible. That called the unmanifested and exhaustless is called the supreme good, which having once attained, they never more return. It is my supreme abode. So here we see that there are some new terms which have arrived, adhyatma. And we may ask, what is this adhyatma? And we will touch upon this in depth in the subsequent uh, slides or talks. But this is providing the actual context of this particular chapter. Now, we have also seen in chapter 7 that, or rather, even before that, in our previous talks, we saw how the unmanifested logos leads to the manifesting logos and the manifested logos. And we also realize that in shloka 7.4 and 5, Lord Krishna mentions about two kinds of prakritis. One is the inferior, which is also known as apara prakriti, and it is divided into eightfold. And then we have a superior prakriti, also known as para prakriti, the very life by which the universe is upheld. And then in 7.6 also we see that Lord Krishna says that these are the womb of all creatures. I, Ishvara, the source and the dissolution of the whole universe. Now, if we see in our human life, these refer or correspond to the Kshetra and Kshetrajna, respectively. And Lord Krishna says this, the body is called Kshetra, that who knows about it in depth is Kshetrajna. So um, we see how these two prakritis, the apara and the para, actually are playing a role in the so-called manifestation. And further, we will see that in 13.2, he talks about a very interesting thing, that know also that I am the knower in every mortal body, O son of Bharata. That knowledge which through the soul is a realization of both the known and the knower is alone esteemed by me as wisdom. The main point of focus here in 13.2 is that know also that I am the knower in every mortal body. So it changes the entire perspective. Earlier, we had the focus, or if we think each one individually, we may think, okay, the highest in me is the Atman, and my reality is I am the Atma. I am none of these bodies, at least theoretically, even if we have not realized it. And then further, he says that actually there is no Atma as my Atma or your Atma, there is one Atma. And then further, we realize from the shloka that the knower itself is one in every mortal body. Now, every mortal body is actually everything in the manifested universe, whether animate or inanimate. Because everything in the manifested universe is a combination of Kshetra and Kshetrajna. We may think it's an inorganic or inanimate object, but the very basis of that object, the substratum of that object, the very existence and expression of that object is based on that one reality. The If you remove the substratum, that object will disappear. That is the whole idea, that this whole so-called universe or the manifestation has two aspects. One is the permanent and the other is the temporary. Everything is actually temporary. Whatever you think of, if you close your eyes and think of anything in this whole universe, anything, ultimately it is temporary. It depends on something or the other. There is interdependence. However, applying the same logic, you will reach to the fact that there is one principle, the beingness, the unthinkable, the unspeakable, the source of all, the basis, the substratum, which is the absolute reality, which is permanent. And Bhagavad Gita and all these scriptures are trying to again and again tell you the same idea in different ways, that itself is you. So then further we see in Secret Doctrine it's mentioned, Buddhi, the Anandamaya Kosha, is but a mirror which reflects absolute bliss. And moreover, that reflection itself is yet not free from ignorance, is not the Supreme Spirit. Being subject to conditions, being a spiritual modification of Prakriti and an effect. Atma alone is the one real and eternal substratum of all, the essence and absolute knowledge, Kshetrajna. It is called in esoteric philosophy the one witness. So all these upadhis from buddhi, manas, to kama, to prana, to astral, to physical stula sharira are nothing but different grades, levels, layers of prakriti. Pre-cosmic ideation to cosmic ideation, reflecting in each of these sheets or koshas or gradations of prakriti, results in the consciousness in that particular sheath. So every sheath has its own ignorance, every sheath has its own I, ahamkara. which is a byproduct of this reflection. So buddhi is also not pure from that perspective, you see. So one has to raise the consciousness from buddhic level to higher level to the atmic level. So only when our consciousness is ekagrat or one pointed on the atmic level and the vrittis are controlled and we reach a stage where we take the stand of the witness position in day-to-day tasks and throughout our life, and our focus is or our consciousness is working from that level, then we will realize that actually everything is just Atman itself. So this conscious activity has to, or this conscious meditation or a conscious practical experience has to be performed by each one of us. And it's a step-by-step process. So Kshetra or the field is also the gross subtle, the gross subtle body of the upadhis. So we can further understand because everything is multi-layered. We have seven-fold macrocosm and seven-fold microcosm. So how do we understand the interrelationship of all these things, and what exactly is the scope of the statement about Kshetrajna and Kshetra from this perspective? In order to understand this, we will just consider a small abstract formula and then we will take it from there. The abstract formula, which it says that the center is everywhere and nowhere. The circumference is everywhere and nowhere, correspondingly. Whenever there is a center, there is an associated circumference, which is very logical. And wherever there is a circumference, there is an associated center. It's the other way to put the first statement because they're interrelated. Each center is a circumference for a smaller center. Each center is a circumference for a smaller center, because if you take a particular point and you zoom in, that becomes a huge circle. But if you zoom out, it becomes a small point. If it is a point, then it has a circumference. And each circumference is a center for a larger circumference. So we will see that if we have a point and a circle or a circumference around it, if we zoom out, that particular circumference becomes a point. So automatically there will be a circumference arising around it. Hence, circle and center are fractal images of each other. Each center is associated with a frequency, and the influence of that frequency is the circumference or the effect of it. So now if we apply these three ideas or formulas or patterns, we can see that the Kshetrajna is actually the center. The circumference which is formed is actually the field or the Kshetra. And there is this particular, if there is a circle and a center, there is a Kshetra and a Kshetrajna, then actually this particular circumference becomes in one way the center for a bigger circumference, and so on and so forth. So ultimately there are many centers and all centers have circumferences or kshetras, but all centers point to the same center because we have seen that there is only one Atma, there is only one reality, there is only one kshetrajna in all the kshetras. So that one center is actually reflected everywhere. The problem happens because of that reflection in the Prakriti. So this kshetra has many meanings. So kshetra is the field, kshetrajna is the knower of the field. So there are many meanings. So first meaning is field is technically a kind of a technical term. It refers to the body conglomerate like a body mind complex. So we have these seven upadhis, all your seven bodies, seven vehicles, all are actually your kshetra. So kshetra is also used in an agriculture perspective. Kshetra is actually an agricultural land. So kshetra is a Sanskrit word. In this agricultural land, we actually sow seeds. So if you see in this diagram, there are all these sheaths. Each sheath, individually or collectively, is kind of an agricultural land or a kshetra or a field. Field could be field as a physical field where crops are grown, or field as a maybe an electromagnetic field also. But what happened is that we, each one of us, the I in us, is the farmer, is sowing seeds in it. These seeds are sown as we do our actions. We sow the seeds. Thought, speech, and action creates new skandhas, new vibration, new elementals, all together every microsecond are stored in each of these fields. Actions on the physical plane leads to seeds which are stored on the kshetra of the physical field. Thought, speech, and action on the astral store seeds on the astral, and so on and so forth. Manasik, on the Manasik plane, always thought vrittis, activities 24 by 7 is happening. 24 by 7, you're creating new seeds and you're sowing those seeds, so on and so forth. Then, this is one meaning out of the three meanings of the word kshetra. Second meaning is it comes from the root kshi, which means to protect, that which protects us from the afflictions in life. And we are always trying to protect ourselves from afflictions. So it is layer by layer sheets of this kshetra which protect, and we need to protect this instrument. And the third meaning is that it comes from the root word, Sanskrit root word kshar, which means to decay. This leads to the meaning that which decays. So the body, mind decay with time till they meet death. This is the common feature of kshetra, the field, and it is perishable by nature. So every field, physical, astral field, pranic field, kamic field, manasik, buddhic, is all of these are perishable. So we also understand that when the seeds are sown, it becomes something known as mental deposits also. And regarding this, um, Patanjali talks about. Patanjali says from these works, there results in every incarnation a manifestation of only those mental deposits which can come to fructification in the environment provided. So the new field. So previous life, there was a kshetra provided, all the sevenfold kshetra. In the new life, new incarnation, again sevenfold kshetra is provided. Previous seeds which were sown will ripe in the new field because the seeds are continued. And um, the stored up karma is continued. I will not go into depth of this because of time constraint. I'll just touch upon two things and then we will quickly have a pause for discussion. We have seen this diagram before, how our senses actually capture data from the outside world. There is a point of contact known as sparsha. Each point of contact has khandhas which taints the information coming. Finally, it gets back to the mental plane. But the important point here is it is the Atman, the light of the Atman, which is going through all the sheets, all the senses, all the planes, all the levels, which is enabling this to happen. It is the basis. If the light of Atman doesn't shine through all the planes, all the sense organs, all the organs of action, and so on and so forth, nothing can happen. It is the electricity which is passing through. It is the basis, it's the substratum. So we also realize that Atman is actually the real door. The illusion occurs in us which states that I am the door. You may say, okay, I am having a headache and I took a pill for the headache. So I am the doer because I felt I am suffering. But it's not like that. It's actually the doer itself is the Atman. The observer, the witness is also the Atman. And the basis of all action is also the Atman. Because of this delusion, all the problem is happening, and attachments and suffering is again and again happening. Then we need to realize that the moment we take the witness position, we will understand that we are detached completely and we will be able to perform from the level of the witness. And that is what this chapter and the other chapters provide. The last idea, which is very important, and after this we'll pause, is that let's say you have an object. So on the left hand side, we have an object. Let's say this object is a flower pot. So you are seeing the flower pot. Now you are observing the flower pot from your eye sense. The light of the room or the sunlight is reflecting on the flower pot. Reflected light goes into your eyes. From there, it reaches somehow to the mind plane, to your mind. Now, in mind, what happens is that there is a vritti which takes place, modification of the mind, because the moment mind through the eye focuses on the flower pot, the mind takes the form of the flower pot. So this vritti, you see, there is a birth of a thought, there is a prime life of a thought, and then there is a death of a thought. So this vritti occurs. But nothing more than this can happen. If there is the light of the Atman which falls on the mind vritti, only then the mind principle can observe the vritti and perceive the vritti. Otherwise, it cannot. Now, here, if you see, we have the higher mind aspect and the lower mind, the buddhi manasik and the kama manasik. On the right hand side, this table is being taken from Secret Doctrine, and HPB very efficiently, effectively maps the three systems or three schools. If you see on the right hand side, the Taraka Raj Yoga, below Sukshma Upadhi is Antakarna. So Sukshma Upadhi is actually Antakarna. And Antakarna is made of Manomaya Kosha and Vijnanamaya Kosha. Manomaya Kosha, we can, in the Theosophical um, world, we can map it to the higher mind or Buddhi Manasik mind. And Vijnanamaya Kosha, we can map it to the lower mind or the Kama Manasik mind. So all the vrittis are happening in the Antakarna, and mind is not able to perceive unless and until the light of the Atman shines on it. But what happens when it shines? There's some side effect happens. Only when the mind is able, only when the light shines on the vritti, the mind is able to perceive the object. But another side effect happens. The notion of I arises. I am able to understand. I am able to see the flower pot. I am analyzing. I am aware of seeing the flower pot. I know the flower pot. Then the association happens between body mind complex, the delusion occurs. And this is where the Vedantic concept of Jivatma arises. Jiva, the enjoyer. We know Jiva is divine monad, Atma Buddhi Manas or Buddhi Manas. But Jivatma is the concept of I, the enjoyer, the ego, the experiencer who experiences pain and pleasure throughout the life arises. But Atman is actually also known as Kutastha, the higher self. And it automatically, during this instance, stores this information somewhere as a witness consciousness. And the witness is the Atman, the witness, the Kutastha, the higher self, is actually observing the vrittis of the nature. But the problem is that when the vritti is happening, we are involved with the vritti rather than being aware of the observer and taking the stand of the observer. So, friends, we'll stop here. Thank you very much.